10. Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. In this shloka, we try to understand the supreme cause and the license of the senses, living responsibly under divine control. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam
Narayanam
Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiret Nashta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtiki. Hare Krishna. Today we continuing shlokas 17 to 19. Pranena Akshipata Shrutat
Pranena Kṣipta Shruta.
त्रुट अंतरा जायते विभो
Rudantara Jayate Vibho.
पिपासतो जक्षतः च
Pipasatah Jakṣatah Cha.
प्राक्मुखं निरभिद्यत्
Pragmukham Nirabhedyat.
मुखतः तालु निर्भिन्नं
Mukhatatalu Nirbhinnam.
जिह्वा तत्र उपजायते
Jihva Tatra Upajayate.
ततः नानारसः जज्ञे
Tatvanana Jagge.
जिह्वया यः अधिगम्यते
Jivayaya Adigamyate.
विवक्षो मुखतः भुम्नोः
Vivokshoho Mukhataha Bhumnoho.
वह्निः वाग्व्यावृत्तं तयोः
Vannihi Vagavyahutam Tayoho.
जले च एतस्य सुचिरं
Jale Chaitasya Suchiram.
निरोधः समजायत
Dhirodha Samajayata.
प्राणेन अक्षिपता क्षुतत्रुट
Pranena Kṣipta Shrutatuta.
अन्तरा जायते विभोः
Antara Jayate Vibhoho.
पिपासतो जक्षतः च
Pipasatah Jakṣatah Cha.
प्राक् मुखं निरभिद्यत्
Prakamukham Nirabhedyat.
मुखतः तालु निर्भिन्नं
Mukhatah Talu Nirbhinnam.
जिह्वा तत्र उपजायते
Jihva Tatra Upajayate.
ततः नानारसः जज्ञे
Tatah Nana Rasah Jagge.
जिह्वया यः अधिगम्यते
Jivayaya Adhigamyate.
विवक्षोः मुखतः भुम्नः
Vivakshah Mukhato Bhumnaha.
वह्निः वाग्व्यवृतं तयोः
Vanni Vakavyahutam Tayoho.
जले च एतस्य सुचिरं
Jale cha etasya suchiram.
निरोधः समजायत
Nirodha samajayata.
प्राणेन क्षिपता क्षुत त्रुत अन्तरा जायते विभोः पिपासतः जक्षतः च प्राक् मुखं निरभिद्यत् मुखतः तालु निर्भिन्नं जिह्वा तत्र उपजायते ततो नानारसः जज्ञे जिह्वया यदिगम्यते विवक्षोः मुखतो भुम्नः वह्निः वाक्व्यवृतं तयोः जले च एतस्य सुचिरं निरोधः समजायत
Hare Krishna. Pranena
हरे कृष्ण
kṣipta kṣutatruda. Antarajayate vibhoho. Pipasatoho jakshah cha. Pranamukham nirabhedyat. Mukhatah talu birbhinnam. Jihva tatra upajayate. ततः नानारसः जज्ञे जिह्वया यः अधिगम्यते विवक्षोः मुखतः भुम्नो वह्निवागव्याहृतं तयोः जले चैतस्य सुचिरं निरोधः समजायत.
Translation and purport by the Srila Prabhupada, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The living force being agitated by the Virat Purusha generated hunger and thirst, and when he desired to drink and eat, the mouth opened. From the mouth, the palate became manifested, and thereupon the tongue was also generated. After this, all the different tastes came into existence so that the tongue can relish them. When the supreme desire to speak, speeches were vibrated from the mouth. Then the controlling deity fire was generated from the mouth. But when he was lying in the water, all these functions remained suspended. Purport by the Srila Prabhupada. The process by which all living beings in the womb of the mother develop their sense organ and sense perception appear to follow the same principle in the case of the Virat Purusha. The sum total of living entities. Therefore, the supreme cause of all generation is not impersonal or without desire. The desire for all kinds of sense perception and sense organ exists in the supreme, and thus they take place in the individual person. This desire is the nature of the supreme living being, the absolute truth, because he has the sum total of all mouth. The individual living entities have mouth similarly with all other senses and sense organ. Here the mouth is the symbolic representation of all sense organ. For the same principles apply to the others also. This gradual process of evolution suggests the explanation of the controlling deities Adidaiva, because Varun is the controlling deity for all relishable juices. Therefore, the mouth becomes the resting place for the tongue, which tastes all the different juices, of which the controlling deity is Varun. This suggests, therefore, that Varun was also generated along with the development of the tongue. The tongue and the palate being instrumental are Adi Bhutam or form of matter, but the functioning deity who is a living entity is Adidaiva, whereas the person undergoing the function is Adhyatma. Thus, the three categories are also explained as to their birth after the opening of the mouth of the Virat Purusha. The four principles mentioned in this verse serve to explain the three main principles, namely Adhyatma, Adidaiva, and Adhibhutam, as explained before. The peculiarity of the gradual development of the different senses is simultaneously supported by their controlling deities. It is to be understood, therefore, that the activities of the sense organs are controlled by the will of the Supreme. The senses are, so to speak, offering a license for the conditioned souls who are to use them properly under the control of the controlling deity deputed by the Supreme Lord. One who violates such controlling regulations has to be punished by degradation to a lower status of life. Consider, for example, the tongue and its controlling deity Varun. The tongue is meant for eating, and the main animals and birds each have their different taste because of different licenses. The taste of human being that of the swine are also are not on the same level. The controlling deity, however, awards or certifies a particular type of body when the particular living entities develop a taste in terms of different modes of nature. If the human being develops taste without discrimination, as does the swine, then the controlling deity is certainly certified for the next term to award him the body of a swine. The swine accept any kind of food, including stools of and a human being who has developed such discriminate taste must be prepared for a degraded life in the next life. Such a life is also God's grace because the conditioned soul desired a body like that for perfectly, tasting a particular type of foodstuff. If a man gets the body of a swine, it must be considered the grace of the Lord, because the Lord awards the facility. After death, the next body is offered by superior control, not blindly. A human being, therefore, must be on his guard as to what sort of body he is going to have in the next life. An irresponsible life of discrimination is risky, and that is the declaration of all scriptures. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Ena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Ena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवाञ्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सगणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेव श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्विताञ्च नमो ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे वाञ्छा कल्पतरुभे च कृपा सिन्धुभे एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Hare Krishna. Today we continue Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 10. Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions, and you try to understand Shloka Kramanka, Shloka number 17 to 19. Here in this Shloka, they're describing about the how the from Virat Purush this all these things existed, like Virat Purush exited and by the living force and generated hunger and thirst. When he desired to drink and eat, then mouth opened, and like uh, everything is generated from uh, that describing here, and again they describing that the an irresponsible life of the discrimination is the risky, and that is the declaration of all the scriptures. Prabhuji will tell us in nicely. Hare Krishna. Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So these verses from second canto. Here we are seeing Shuddha Goswami ji describing how from Virat Purush, the universal form of the Lord, the living force, the senses, and the controlling deities arise. Am I audible clearly? We see the divine.
Yes.
Thank you very
Hare
much.
Krishna.
We see the divine process of creation unfolding. First, hunger and thirst appear, then the mouth, tongue, palate, speech, and finally the controlling deity, Agni, that is fire. So these verses, they reveal that the Supreme Lord is not impersonal or without desire. Rather, he possesses within himself the seed of all sensory desires and functions that later appear in the living entities. Just as the universe expands from his will, so too do our faculties of perception and enjoyment arise from his energy only. So when we start understanding this, it leads us to act responsibly, knowing that all our senses are under the divine supervision. So what we gather first and foremost is that Krishna is the supreme source of all senses. As we can see that creation begins with divine desire. The Lord's will becomes the cause of activity. And when he desired to eat and drink, the mouth, the organ of speech and taste, it manifested. So everything is starting with Krishna. Therefore, the example which is given here is that in the womb the embryo develops its senses gradually. The universal form of the Lord also unfolds his senses one after another in a similar manner. So the ultimate source of all sensory power is the personal Supreme Lord, not an impersonal energy. And all desires for eating, speaking, seeing, hearing, touching, they first exist within him. The living entities simply reflect those desires in miniature form. The mouth symbolizes all sense organs because the same divine principle applies to every sense. The absolute truth is a conscious being full of desire, not an impersonal void. Our ability to desire, to act, to pursue, is just fragment of a supreme will. So the question arises, what is the principle of divine desire? Unless one learns the science of Krishna, his energies, expansions, emanations, the knowledge remains incomplete. And that is why the Achinta Bheda Bhed Tattva, the principle of this Tattva, that is simultaneous oneness and difference, it exists everywhere, even in the spiritual world. The creation starts not by chance, but by the desire of the Lord to expand his happiness. One of the examples which Prabhupada gives in his lectures is that when a husband and a wife desire to have a child, it reflects in a minute way the Lord's desire to expand his bliss. The difference is that while our desires are mixed with ignorance and karma, the Lord's desire is completely pure and creative. And that is why we need to live a regulated life. There is a difference between human regulation and demoniac impulses. A devotee acts under regulation. He follows the instructions of the spiritual master and the scriptures. On the other hand, a demoniac person acts whimsically without reference to higher authority. In Bhagavad Gita, we have already seen in the 16th chapter, 5th to 7th verse, wherein we are taught divine qualities leading to liberation, while demoniac qualities bring bondage. Lord Krishna told Arjuna, you need not fear, O son of Pandu, for you are born with divine qualities. So Arjuna's hesitation before the battle was not weakness, but divine reflection. He was considering right and wrong. Such thoughtfulness is transcendental, it is not demoniac. So those born with divine nature, they follow a regulated life and obey Vedic injunctions. Those of demoniac nature ignore or defy them. They neither know what to do nor what not to do. In them, neither cleanliness nor proper behavior nor truthfulness is found. Hence, obedience to scriptural authority is the line that divides the divine from the demoniac. So, what are the social implications? Especially in today's age, where we see the modern irreligiosity. Modern society has rejected scriptural regulation, especially regarding family and moral conduct. Shastra states that women should be protected in childhood by the father, in youth by the husband, in old age by the son. This is not suppression, but affectionate guardianship, just as a child is cared for and not enslaved. And when these principles are ignored, social harmony collapses. Modern civilization glorifies artificial freedom, leading to divorce, exploitation, loneliness. And marriage, once sacred, is now treated as imagination. The demons do not accept any instruction that benefits society, and so social misery is a natural result of disregarding this divine law of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And hence it becomes important that we understand the path to understanding the absolute truth. Knowledge of absolute truth is not easily attained by intellectual effort. Even the wise are often bewildered. However, if the spiritual master is merciful, then by his grace, everything is revealed. It is mentioned that Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he used to say, Yasya prasadat bhagavad prasado. So, by the mercy of the Guru, the mercy of the Lord is obtained. The process of bhakti is therefore one of submission, not challenge. Sri Devahuti, though the mother of Lord Kapila, she humbly said, My Lord, I am a woman. My intelligence is not great. Please explain so that I can understand. Her humility attracted divine revelation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu teaches the same thing. Trinadapi sunichena tarorapi sahishnuna. Be humbler than a blade of grass and more tolerant than a tree. The transcendental nature of Krishna cannot be understood by blunt material senses. Our senses must be purified through engagement in his service, and that purification begins with the tongue by chanting and honoring Prasad. And that is where the power of the holy name comes into picture. We'll be seeing in the 12th canto, 3rd chapter, 51st shloka, where it is declared, Kaler dosha nidhe rajan asti ek mahan guna kirtanadev krishnasya mukta sangha param prajet. Although Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults, there is one great virtue. Simply by chanting the name of Krishna, one can be liberated. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu further emphasizes, Hare Nam, Hare Nam, Hare Nam eva kevalam. Chant Hare Krishna, there is no other way in this age. If one chants sincerely, Krishna helps both internally and externally. Internally as Paramatma giving intelligence, and externally through his representative, the spiritual master. And thus by Guru Krishna Prasada, one obtains both the seed of bhakti and the full fruit of Krishna realization. And then there is manifestation of the tongue and the taste. From as Shukta Goswamiji himself declares here, Bhagavatam describes the origin of taste and its presiding deity Varun. Varun governs the relishable juices, rasa, and thus the tongue becomes the resting place for all flavor. So the triad of creation, Adibhu, the physical element, tongue and palate, Adhyatma, the individual experiencer, and Adideva, the controlling deity Varuna. Every sense thus functions under the Lord's threefold arrangement. And then we understand speech and its responsibility. Each sense is activated by the divine will and supervised by corresponding duty. A supreme desire to speak, speech was vibrated from his mouth. And so fire, who is the controlling deity, was generated. But when he was lying down on the water, all these functions remained suspended. So our sense organs, they are not independent. They function under license from the Supreme. The term, for instance, is meant for chanting and eating only sanctified food. If misused for gossip, blasphemy, or uncontrolled indulgence, it leads to punishment. The Bhagavatam warns that one who uses his senses indiscriminately must accept a lower birth according to his developed tests. In purport, Prabhupada gives the example that if one develops the test of a swine eating everything and anything, Varuna, the controller, arranges for him a matching body. Actually, this too is the grace of the God, because the Lord fulfills each soul's desire through his natural laws. Hence, a wise person must live cautiously, aware that his next body is determined by his present habits. A responsible life leads to degradation. So, what is important is a life under divine supervision. Everything in the universe moves by the will of the Lord. We may act freely, but the results are administered by superior control. That itself is not random, it is precisely arranged according to the living entity's karma and consciousness. So human life is meant for introspection. What can I have? What kind of body am I preparing for? And living without discrimination is the greatest risk. And every scripture warns against us. This is the reality of danger in material life. Danger can strike at any moment. One may be healthy, successful, secure, yet it is always waiting. People were standing on the signal, and all of a sudden there is a blast. Srila Prabhupada said, this world is Martyaloka, the planet of death. People crave safety, wealth, enjoyment, but such security is an illusion. Real safety lies only in surrendering to Krishna's lotus feet. As long as we forget our eternal relationship with him, fear will haunt us. Just as a child without parents feels terrified and lost, so the soul separated from Krishna lives in anxiety. And see, Krishna is calling, come back to me, my child. You have suffered enough. You think you're a man, a woman, an American, an Indian, but these are temporary roles. Surrender unto me and free. So true knowledge is Dhyan and Vairagya through Bhakti. Knowledge means to understand relationship with Krishna and our duty towards him. And when that understanding dawns, detachment, Vairagya follows naturally. This is the fruit of Bhakti Yoga. One who practices devotion gains both wisdom and renunciation effortlessly. But without surrender to Krishna, we cannot know our true position. Krishna reveals himself only to his devotees, not to proud or faithless. So it is up to us to choose the higher path. There are two aims of life: prayers, that is immediate sensual pleasure, and shreyas, the ultimate eternal welfare. The foolish pursue the prayers, temporary satisfaction, but intelligence strive for shreyas, spiritual progress and liberation. Children want to play all day, they resist education. Similarly, materialists chase fleeting choice, avoiding spiritual discipline. But real happiness comes from pursuing shreyas. And the supreme shreyas is Bhakti Yoga, loving service to God. So in conclusion, what we see is the revelation of the divine design behind creation and human responsibility. All senses, desires, deities originate in Supreme Person, the Virat Purush. True freedom lies not in indulgence, but in surrender, not in exploitation, but in divine service. The senses are sacred trusts, not instruments of exploitation. Let us use them in Krishna's service and see the life becoming perfect.